And we continue learning Dirshu Mishnah Berurah. Today's Dirshu for Tu Bishvat. Siman Tzadi Ches. And we pick it up with Sif Beis, continuing to learn Hilchais Tefillah. Says the Mechaber Lo Yisrael B'Magam Sheish Davar Shemavata Kavanasai. Continuing on many of the halachas, the theme that we've been learning. How not only does one have to proactively try to have kavanah, but rather one has to do everything in his ability to set himself up for success to have kavanah. Says the Mechaber, one should not daven in an area that is mevatel is kavanah. V'loi b'sham mevatel is kavanah, not at a time that he's not going to have kavanah. V'ach shavin on nizarim b'chol zeh, says the Mechaber, nowadays, already back in Sfas, Rav Yosef Kaira teaches that they were not careful about this when they she'ein anu mechavnin kol kach b'tefillah. So unfortunately, we don't have so much kavanah when we daven in the first place. So we continue over here with the Mishnah Berurah Sivkatan Dalit Shemevata. Explains the Mishnah Berurah Kigoyin Sheikher Chadash Shemiriach Uchagavna, like a new beer that has a very fragrant smell. You're not going to have kavanah, so you have this overpowering smell. B'shashem Mevateles, or at a time that is mevatel your kavanah. What does this refer to? Your mind is not at ease. For some pain, or you're in anger, or you just got off a journey. You're not ready to sit down and throw yourself into davening. It says the Mishnah Berurah nowadays, if you want to daven, says Mishnah Berurah, if you want to daven, or perhaps you're going to daven in such a situation, so cautions the Mishnah Berurah, of course, you have to try your best to remove that impediment, to remove whatever it is that's going to block your kavanah, as we learned. But nowadays, though we don't have so really have kavanah, as much as we could do, we have to do. And therefore, one should not daven is certainly a foul smell. So even though we don't have so much kavanah, and the Mechaber seem to have thrown in the towel, the Mishnah Berurah teaches us from the Pri Megadim and B'Shem de Lavosh that we still have to try our best to create a situation that we can have as much kavanah as possible. We continue over here in Dirshu note number 14, in which he comments on that which we just said, that nowadays that we don't have so much kavanah. Says the Dirshu, if you could daven in a place that you have kavanah, but you have to leave before the end of davening, or if you could daven in a place that you cannot have kavanah, so we're trying to weigh two different things. You could daven in one shul where you're going to have kavanah, but you know what, the time doesn't allow it, you're going to have to run out. Or you could daven in a different place, you're not really going to be able to have kavanah, but over there you could stay for the whole davening, and I guess this is probably a very classical scenario. This is the quick minyan versus slow minyan. You could grab a quick minyan, you'll get the whole tefillah, but you might not have kavanah. Or you could go to the slower minyan and you'll be able to have kavanah, but you might have to leave early. Says Rosh Zalman, it's better to daven b'kavanah. Why? Tefillah is avodah shebelev, is a service of your heart. You're serving Hashem, you're talking to Him. And he adds on, Shotzi Lasses Kin Gam. Even if, listen to this one, you're going to miss Kriyas HaTorah on Monday and Thursday. But he says, of course, you have to try your best. And you have to tell people, don't you think you're just running out in the middle of davening. Which brings out the severity of kavanah. You go to the slower davening, you might leave early, you might even miss lading. But at the end of the day, you'll have kavanah. So that wins out. Continues Dirshu number 15. And even if you can't daven because of all the tirdos, all the things in your mind, we're going to learn in Siman Kov Ches. Even though you did what is right, still this is considered amazing. This is not considered amazing. And therefore, even though you did what is wrong, meaning if you have all these tirdos, your mind is not at ease. So what are you supposed to do? not daven. As Mishnah Berurah said, you're supposed to try to calm yourself down and figure out a way to daven. Let's say you didn't. You felt you're too whatever, you can't daven. You let have tashlumim, says Mishnah Berurah, even though you did the wrong thing, it's not called amazing, and therefore you're still allowed to daven. We'll continue in Dirshu number 16. Which he comments that you can't daven in an area, in a place that has this foul smell. So Dirshu 16 goes and points out, even though there's no isser due to this fragrant beer and whatnot, and there's no Isser due to the bad smell of the ipush. It's a moldy smell. As we learned in Siman and Tas, something that the tivoi is reich ra, gasoline and feces and other things, that the nature of the item smells bad. Those are items, the opposite. Those are items you don't have to distance yourself from. So like this wine and whatnot, midin, you're allowed to daven in its proximity. Still, you're not supposed to do tu kavana. Only something that spoils, you're not allowed to daven near it. So says the Dirshu that they explain, that's only when something is such a terrible, foul, repugnant odor. Then you can't say Krishma Ksepcha. But something that just has a strong scent, then you're allowed to daven. Okay, and let's continue with Sif Gimel. But of course, supposed to try your best not to be in such a situation. Says the Mechaber, Yispaal derech tachnunim, when you daven, you should daven in a way of supplications. Like an unused begging at the door and pleasantly. And the tefillah should not look like a burden. When you're trying just to run through it and be done with it. So says the Mishnah Berurah over here, like an ani begging at the door. Who in Yinecha? This is one Indian. You should speak, should daven calmly and nicely, like you're saying supplications. Like someone who's asking for mercy. You should place in your heart, Malach, a mazal, a keichav, there's no creation, angel, constellation or star, lamalish elasa that can answer your tefillah ki im birtzaini yisbarach, an important realization sometimes. Of course, one might go to Kivrei Sadikim. Of course, there's different schools, but at the end of the day, who are we davening? The one entity, Ritzaini Yisbarach Hashem, that could answer our tefillos. And it shouldn't look like a masa, a burden, sevkat taz, pirush. What does this mean? You're saying it in the wording of tachnunim of supplications. If you're not thinking that you need something, if you're not cognizant of this realization that I need something and I'm coming to the king to ask him for it. Rather, you might say the words nicely, but you're doing it. You have an obligation. You got to run through it. That is not proper. That says Mishnah Berurah. We do not go back and daven. We continue with Sif Dalet, says the Mechaber. The tefillah is in a place of a sacrifice. And therefore, when you have kavana, it should be like you're bringing a carbon. We know when you bring a carbon, there's something called pigel. When you bring a carbon, you're not able to have other thoughts in mind. Similarly by tefillah. Like any other outside thoughts not that has to do directly with the carbon, would passel up the carbon. You should sound like when you bring the carbon into the Beis HaMikdash, when you have a set place, each kayin at his set place, where he did his shchita, he did the slaughtering, and he placed the blood. We've already learned you shouldn't have a separation between you and the wall. Why? Because you're like a carbon, and if a carbon has something that separates between itself and the vessel, it also invalidates the carbon. So similarly, we are the carbon. We're coming to our Creator. You want to be right by the wall so nothing separates you. You should have nice clothing. Of course, it's another one of the sources that it comes to wear a jacket, to wear a hat, to wear a beged, something, not just to run in with whatever you're wearing and start davening. Kemoi big day kuna as a kayanim had special begadim. El she'in kol adam yachla vazviz al zeh mikol makayim taivu she'elam echnasayim yuchad tefillah. You should have nice pants. Mishum nekiyas. Of course, this was more about in their world without bathrooms. And one night there were always issues having meiraglaim and stuff in their pants. Nowadays, perhaps not so relevant, but certainly relevant to have nice clothing or special clothing, we should say, for davening. Let's look at the Mishnah Berurah. Sivkatin Yod Bein Erle Bein Akir. You should have no separation, as we learned, between yourself and the wall. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Betur Kasavait, says the Torah. Ubeinoi Lekarka, between you and the ground. Kasvataz Dafka Gimel Tvachim. What does this mean? It means you shouldn't be in an elevated area. Pachs Gimel Tvachim and Filu Mitzvah Lek. There's not even a mitzvah to have less than that. V'yesh Oisam Filu Pachs Gimel. Kalbakim the Kuliyalma Motor Lishtoyach B'Yom Kippur Malkarka Asavim. You'll have to bow on a ground of grass. Yevation that is dry. V'lamad Aleim L'Spal to daven to them. The bottle of Gaber Karka, it's considered null to the ground. And Aser L'Spal Bebricha, and we don't daven Bebricha, which is I believe that's in the swimming pool, Bebricha, the stream. We'll see in a moment the Dirshu on that. But before we get there, let's see the Machaber Sif Hey. Says the Machaber in Sif Hey. Al Yachshav, one should not think, Rahu Shiyasa Kadosh Baruch Hu Bakashasi Kivisha Kivanti B'Tfila. Meaning, after we finish learning about all the kavanah that you're supposed to have, after we say how you're supposed to be like a carbon, perhaps one is now going to have the thought, Hashem, you should answer me. I had such incredible kavanah, and it's even roi. It's fitting that you answer me. Says the Machaber, no, ki adrab is a masker of adam by davening in such a manner that brings out Rahman al the sins of a person. It calls the question in front of Hashem. You're so confident. So in heaven they start looking into your deeds, which of course no one wants. Elos, what should you think? Should think Hashem in His infinite mercy and His infinite kindness should answer my tefillah. If you ever believe what I understand in his heart, Mi ani dal, who am I so poor, v'nivzan, degraded, balabakish, misa melech, malchei, amlacham, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Who am I to be able to talk to Hashem? If not for the wonderful mercies that Hashem does with His creations. Before we call it a day, let's just look at a few more Dirshus. Dirshu note number 17 points out that when we say the first bracha of Shon Esrei of Avos, which is not a bakasha, it's a shvach, it's praising Hashem, says the Tila David, it's yitachein. Even by this, you should sarach l'sadir shvach shal makayim, just like an ani. Meaning, maybe one would think if you're saying praises, you shouldn't say it like an ani. Says the Tila David, he still should daven in that manner. Now, if someone needs to daven for a parnasa, or if someone who's sick, says the Buchacha, the Gilyon Shulchan Aruch, the name of the Sefer Chasidim, what should you think? You should think in your heart, not only for those brachas, but rather, why? Because if you only daven for Parnasa, you only daven for someone who's sick, up in heaven they think, oh, that's all you need. Rather, you should have in mind for all the brachas. Continues the Dirshu over here, note number 19, he says, you're allowed to daven on this grass in Yom Kippur, it's batal, but we're going to see Mir Tzashem in Ochus Yom Kippur, he's meikol only ladim mitzunan, only someone who needs it. What about on pillows and blankets? Even if it's not 3 tvachim high, that would not be a problem. And finally, what was this last halacha of Biberchav? It's not that he's davening in the water, but rather Dirshu explains what's going on over here. You're davening on your knees, and that is an inappropriate way to daven. The Hilchos Ketanis explains this, even though theoretically this is called Amida, because Roif Gufa is Amida, Mikal Makayim. This is not the right way to daven. And Amir Tashem will pick it up from Siman Sadi Tes in the next shiur.